You were talking about Vladdy there, and that's a big conversation up here. Even with, again, the team being in the position they're in, the pressure's got to be on this guy to perform a lot better in the second half.
Yeah, it does, because at some point you have to expect regression toward the mean for some of the other guys, right? They're going to fall back a little bit. The league's going to make an adjustment. And that's when Vladdy's going to have to put the team on his shoulders. You get $500 million. You got to carry the team for you got to be the one leading the way, and then other guys to piggyback on top of what you're doing. And Bichette too, for that matter. He's in the walk year of the deal. He needs to hit for more power and give them that. And if those two guys can become, their best, then I think it takes so much pressure off everybody else. And I think that it can sustain this winning streak they've been on.
Yeah, they've been red hot. I mean, up until the last couple games, I guess, in Sacramento and the getaway game down in Chicago. They lost 3 or 4 coming home, but still they're sitting atop the American League East, and we're inching closer to the trade deadline, and that's the next conversation. Now that we're through, the draft last night, we expect Santander to return off the IL at some point, expect Varsho to return to the lineup at some point. What do you think is reasonable to expect Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro to do leading up to the trade deadline?
Yeah, I think they're going to focus on pitching. They've gotten production out of the bottom part of the lineup, and they expect Santander and Varsho to be back. They expect more from Vladdy. I think it's going to come down to adding one starting pitcher. And I think ideally I'd like it to be a more front-end guy and then, a lesser reliever. But if you can't get a front-end guy, a Zach Gallen or somebody like that, then I think you get a depth piece just to protect with Scherzer and his health. And if Eric Lauer sort of falls off a little bit, and then I'd get a closer. I'd get Helsley from St. Louis. I'd get Emmanuel Clase from the Guardians. There's some talk that he could be available, and it's a couple of years of control there. But I think they've got to think big with it. And, if they don't get end-of-the-game relievers, I think I'd get 2. I think they need some help from the left side in the pen. But I think pitching's the way to go right now. And they've got to hope and expect that Santander and Varsho give them something more.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the closer, because we've been talking about the offseason moves that haven't done anything, Santander being one of them. Scherzer's been injured. Jimenez has done basically nothing at the plate. Yet Hoffman, has been healthy. He's got a 5 ERA. What is your read on what's up with him? Because he's not blowing a lot of saves. I think he's blown 4 saves so far, and he's available for them. But you get a guy in a position like that where his ERA is up over 5, that's trouble, and it's trending towards it being very troublesome once the lights are the brightest.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, it's one thing that, you're dicey in the regular season. You may blow a game here and there in the regular season. But you want predictability in the playoffs, that you've got a lead, you're going to close it out, you're going to get a win. Because, one blown save in the playoffs costs you a series, and you can't afford to do that. And that's why I prefer to get the closer, move Hoffman to the 7th inning, 8th inning. It's really where he's been most of his career as opposed to the 9th. And that way you've got some depth, you've got some options in case, your other closer is used 3 days in a row and you need to bring in Hoffman, you can do it. I just want to take the burden off him. I just don't see him as necessarily that lockdown guy, and I think they need to find one.
So we'll get you out of here with a question about the American League East in general, because the Jays have just won 10 in a row. They're sitting atop the division. The Yankees are 2 games back. The Sox just wrapped up 10 wins in a row, which obviously that winning streak will continue post-break. Where do you project this going? Blue Jays, Yankees, Red Sox, the Rays are sputtering, but they've been pretty good this year. How many teams do you think make the playoffs, and who do you think wins the division?
Yeah, I think you've got a chance to have 4 teams in the American League East make the playoffs.
Wow.
I do. I think Tampa Bay, Toronto, Boston, and the Yankees. I don't really believe in Seattle. I don't think anybody else in the Central is going to put them. And I think Tampa Bay is really good. Now, I think the Blue Jays can hold on and win this division. But I think a general manager may decide who wins the division and who's the wild card teams and how they line up accordingly, right? So the Yankees, they need to fortify their pitching with some of the injuries they've had. They could use some bullpen help as well. The Red Sox need more pitching too, and I think they're going to let the young kids play. Tampa Bay, they're already starting to fortify the bullpen. They got the Baker kid from the Orioles, and I think they're going to focus more on pitching as well. So I think the general managers in this division are going to decide the order in which they finish, because I think they're that closely matched.